there's been a few owners that I've wanted to throw off the boat, literally, just like, yeah, and not even screaming at me, just listen to them bark.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the final Sail Faster episode for 2025. Firstly, a huge thank you to everyone who's listened over the last couple of years and to the guests who've so generously shared their time and experience. And to those of you who've sent feedback, support, and great guest ideas. I genuinely love hearing from you. We're now at 60 plus episodes with listeners all over the world, which is great. And that's only possible thanks to the quality of our guests and, of course, to you for tuning in. So thank you. Wishing you all great sailing in 2026. Sail fast, sail faster. And if you're enjoying Sail Faster, please tell your sailing friends about us. Turning to today's episode, well, we've got Harry Legum with us. And if you spent time around high-level sailing, there's a good chance you've come across his work. Harry has more than 35 years of experience in physical fitness and coaching and is the founder of Annapolis Sailing Fitness, the world's first sailing-specific training studio. Harry has worked with sailors at every level, from junior and collegiate programs and weekend sailors to Olympic campaigns and America's Cup teams. Harry has been the official trainer for Olympic gold medalist and Rolex Yacht Swimmer of the Year Anna Tunnicliffe. He's worked with America's Cup sailor and two-time Rolex Yacht Swimmer of the Year Terry Hutchinson, who I'm sure you all know, and helped develop training programs for yacht clubs, national teams, and the US Naval Academy sailing program. What makes Harry's approach especially interesting for me is that it goes beyond pure strength. He focuses on movement, durability, and staying mentally sharp when racing gets chaotic, which of course it always does. So today we're going to dig into what top teams and top sailors do differently in terms of preparing for those kinds of situations, and what sailors at every level can take from the pros and apply right away. So I think you'll really enjoy the episode with Harry. He, as you'll find, is very entertaining, full of energy and ideas. Here we go. All right, Harry, with that long introduction,
Yeah,
thanks for joining us today. It's
sure thing. Good to be here.
So let's start at the beginning. How did all this start for you?
So growing up in Annapolis, I mean, it was all too easy to get into the world of sailing. And I started when I was very young. And back then, they didn't even have the Opti class. They had the Turtle class. I don't have an offshore resume under my belt, but, I've been sailing my whole life one way or another. And if I haven't sailed it and tried it, then I guarantee I've trained somebody who has.
So how did you start, getting into sort of strength training and then training others?
So actually, so at age 9 years old, I started doing some weightlifting, and it never ended. It progressed. Fast forward to where I was on the U.S. Army powerlifting team, and then simultaneously, I was a shock trauma. Oh, I don't know what they called it in the well, comparative to now, it's a shock trauma paramedic in the Army.
Mm.
So I was doing that, and then I was still weightlifting, and then I was coaching people simultaneously. I'm also a Special Olympics coach, and that's probably one of the greatest joys out of any of this. To be around those Special Olympics kids were just magical. But anyway, I'm all over the place with the sailing fitness. Just doing all the sailing for so long and doing all the fitness so long, I just kind of had this thing in my head where I was like, gee, I wonder if anybody's combining the two. And I remember I went to Google and I was like, why isn't there some kind of a sailing fitness? And I looked it up and I saw maybe one or two little examples of maybe so and so gave a 1 hour clinic. And I said, well, geez, let's put it together. And that's when I met a few people in particular that I probably have to give a lot of credit to, that helped me to kind of put it all together and introduce me to everybody. And that's Jim Alsop, who was a legend in the North Sales world and a star world champion and Olympic America's Cup and just a legend. And then you have John Tahansky, and he was somebody who was the offshore coach and J World owner. And then you also had Jeff Ewenson, who, God bless him, passed away a number of years ago. But he and I were very, very tight. And I trained him when he was doing a lot of fin sailing. And he introduced me to just a ton of people and was just so pro about the idea. But I would get around these different colleges and all the way from here over to Stanford. And everybody was just very excited about the idea, putting it all together. That's how it started, at least. It's just having these key people and just saying, hey, let's have a clinic. And I remember calling Terry Hutchinson, and he was in California at the time at the FAR World Championships. And I said, I need some credibility of somebody who may be interested in, some sessions. I said, "Are you into it?" He goes, "Well, yeah, I'd love to train with you when I get back home." Well, that started that whole thing, and that was 21 years ago. So, and then we started making incredible little programs that were, like, "Oh, you're a grinder and you grind, for the TP52 program. Well, hey, I'll give you some sessions if you can show me what a really good grinding program looks like." Or like I trained some of the top bowmen going back years ago. I mean, I've been training people now for, now it's over 40 years, but 25 years ago when I was really putting all this together, I would take each position. I'd say, you're a weekend warrior. You're a Wednesday night racer who's serious about competing and you're 50 or 60 years old. What are you concerned? I went through everybody and I sailed on every kind of boat that's around, just to try it out and see what, they were all about. That's how it just kind of developed. It just blossomed. But it's just interesting. Like I say, Stanford ate it up. Naval Academy, I coached there for about 8 years. I owe that to Gavin O'Hare, who was the coach at the time, um, who got very excited about this whole thing. And then, sure enough, Yvette Davids, who's the former superintendent, I remember she used to come over and she would say, "Who are you guys, and why are you working out in the rain?" And it's like, "Well, this is the sailing team." No, like, wow.
So, did you ever go on to different boats to try and see what a bowman was doing on a TP?
Oh, sure. Oh, you have to do that. I mean, I used to videotape and then I would duplicate it. I go, "Man, I've never done this. Let me try this.
Yeah.
Let me see literally what it feels like." And then I'd watch their form and I'd say, "Oh man, they need to squat down more on this," whatever. And, you end up making, volumes of notes on sailing fitness and biomechanics.
You'd film them in action.
Oh, you got to, in my opinion. Like my recommendation to a young trainer would be, yeah, you got to get on the boats. The mistake I see, and it's kind of still going on a little bit in colleges, is that you get the trainer who's been assigned to work with the sailing team, and God bless them, but their specialty may be the football team. So they come over and they train like they train the football team, meaning, which is, I mean, they're great exercise, but meaning squats, deadlifts, bench press, and they're not getting into balance and agility and endurance and maybe some of the things that these college kids really need while they're sailing their 420s or lasers or what have you. And they're also not going out there on the coach boat to, watch what's happening, and they're not going to the debriefing and all the things that goes into the chemistry of making, whether it's college sailing or whether you're working your crew on a Beneteau on a Wednesday night.
Harry, talk us through what happens when you first sort of engage with a sailor who wants to go through this kind of program.
Yeah, I mean that's God, that's such a good spot because you connect with somebody one way or another. I mean, you can intuitively tell, where somebody's head is and what their motivation is. Obviously, you got to go through the physical. I mean, like, oh, you had reconstructive knee surgery. If somebody has that, we're not really going to get into sailing fitness. We're going to be talking biomechanics of your reconstructed knee. And let's just make sure, you could just do your basics. I mean, eventually get into sailing fitness, of course. Um, but then there's the motivation because I remember, so much of this is in books and being stoic and different, kind of personal self-help books like Viktor Frankl and Man's Search for Meaning. But one of the things that's quoted right at the beginning, it says that, he who has a why to live can bear with almost any how. So, but if a person doesn't have the why that's strong enough, how we do it is irrelevant. No matter all the different techniques and all the motivation and et cetera, et cetera. You're on a team or you're by yourself or you're doing an Olympic campaign or you're doing a Wednesday nights. Well, if your why isn't quite there, then the how is going to get. When there's maybe a bad weather or something, maybe you won't want to go out when the team is counting on you to go out. I mean, but if you got a strong why, that helps anybody do anything. So that's where it all starts with a person, with that initial evaluation of where they're at. And then also, you do a workout and you also clarify that the grit factor is there, that they may say, well, I've got a great why, or I've got the how, and I'm going to train with you. Well, if they don't have grit and they don't put action behind their talk, then that becomes what? Talk's cheap. It's like, okay, well, you talk a good game, but, you know,
So what's grit to you then in this context?
grit is getting out there and doing it.
Yeah.
Just personal grit, doing things that maybe you don't want to do, but as long as it's legal, moral, honest, and ethical, and it helps with your dream and vision, in this case, sailing and health and fitness, it's like, you know what? I don't care what the excuse is, unless God forbid you're in a coma, show up for yourself.
Harry, I know it's a given that you obviously really enjoy working with everybody you've worked with, but
Mm.
is there anybody who particularly stood out to you, somebody that you really enjoyed working with, that you saw the progression and over time?
Yeah. I've trained people who, between me and them and the walls, they've had terrible drug addiction that nobody really knew about. Or I've had people going through terrible losses. And, when you do personal training, whether it is a team or whether it's individual, it does get personal. People tend to, open up a bit, and that's okay as long as you respect that. But I mean, I remember I've had a very dramatic case where a guy named Dan R, who's a Naval Academy graduate, uh, he got in a terrible accident and paralyzed from the hips down. And so here he is with this upper body looking like Superman, and this lower body is unfortunately, it's atrophied so terrible. But just to see his attitude, to me, that's what it comes down to as well. The basics. And one of those basics for me is attitude. The only way to really be a good sailor is to do a lot of sailing. So that's the only thing I ever recommend people, like, well, how does this all come together? If you work out and train as far as the physical part, then that enables you to do so much more while you are sailing. It's a beautiful marriage. I mean, it also helps with recovery.
Mm.
But some of the things that I get a buzz on after all this time is when they say, yeah, but that next Monday I actually recuperated a lot faster. And that's universal, whether you're a big time sailor, doing racing rather, or whether you're casual cruising. It's that recovery period. And that's where training also can get the blood flowing and get you recuperated once more.
How long does it take to get a sailor into peak physical shape, typically for, say, a national championship? If I was going to start today,
Well, what am I targeting? What am I trying to do? I'm trying to do this Transpac, or I'm trying to do this Caribbean race, or I'm trying to do the local Chesapeake Bay or California, whatever. Okay, it's 6 months from now, it's a year from now. But as far as somebody getting peak performance, obviously we got to once again start, where are they now? Because everybody's different. It's like, okay, well, where are you right now today, physically, mentally, attitude, everything. What kind of support do you have? What kind of lifestyle do you have outside of the fitness? Are you getting enough sleep? Are you just aggravated all the time? Or, there's so much that has to go into it. It's a real holistic kind of thing that happens over time. I mean, a lot of times you think you go to a gym, you count to 12 or 15, you get the heck out of there. I mean, there's truth to that. And hopefully you get a buzz from it, meaning, you get the endorphins going, the adrenaline, there's a baseline. But there's so much more that can be done through this process that bleeds over into sailing and quite frankly, everyday life.
you imagine that it's mostly about strength, but you talk a lot about balance and agility and quality of movement and that sort of thing.
Think about it when you're out sailing, whatever kind of sailing you're doing, but we're talking under the umbrella of racing. I mean, you're dealing with current, you're dealing with wind, you're dealing with a boat that could care less if you fall down. I mean, it's not forgiving. You're going to get bruises, and if it is blowing out there, you're going to be tossed around a bit.
How do you teach balance?
So you have to work on balance and agility and use the tools that are given to you. Again, the only way to really get good at it with sailing is you got to go sailing different conditions. Around here, you get a lot of people who are sailing wonderfully in the South River, Seven River, Chesapeake, but then they go down to Florida to train, and they're in the ocean now, and that's a different ball game. You get these ocean breezes that are just, very dynamic. I mean, so you have to practice doing those kind of things that will trigger it, at least, so that when you're on a boat, at the very least, your body has gone through similar motions and knows how to recruit muscles, and the muscle does have memory, and so does your mind.
How do you replicate that in a gym?
There's a thing called a Bosu ball, which is basically a half sphere. Maybe you've seen it. It's a blue dome.
Yeah.
And that's one of my favorite tools within the world of balance and agility. There's a agility ladder. It's a ladder you just throw out. It looks like a fireman's kind of a ladder. And there's certain movements you could do on there that are very similar, like we see football players when they're lifting their knees up, running through tires. Well, that's all agility kind of thing. And then there's different things that replicates agility and balance. I stole this from somebody years ago. I thought it was so clever, where you do things like you put somebody in a plank position, for example, and they're already exhausted. The abs are already exhausted. The upper body's just shot. They're a star athlete, but right now they just want to get the heck out of there. So you put them in a plank position, you have them lift one leg, and they have to take a deck of cards and turn them over one at a time and say what each card is using a little mental thing. And then I'll shuffle them up and I'll say, now do this and now do that. And it's a ridiculous little card game, but we're trying to use the brain as they're suffering. And then how do you put it together? And so hopefully those kind of little tricks and gimmicks, they can translate sometimes. You're just challenging yourself beyond. I train a lot of special forces dudes that want to become a Navy SEAL, just from my association with the Naval Academy over the years. And a number of them have become Navy SEALs, quite honestly. But it's interesting to get into their heads. It's like their motivations are different than, let's say, our motivations. But you find out, how do they need to be pushed? What's important to them? And they go through levels that are just for any of us would be kind of psycho. I mean, it's crazy. So everybody's different. That's why you have to work with the individual from at first. Where are they right now? What are their goals? Why are they doing it?
Harry, can we talk about the link between physical training and mental performance? Because we talked about this a couple of days ago. The process that you go through can help sailors stay calm in chaos, handling stress during breakdowns and mark groundings, emergencies, all that sort of thing.
I've had the different tacticians, as we've mentioned, that I've trained over the years, and you wonder, well, why would a tactician need to worry about working out, as et cetera, et cetera? And it's about decision making, and it's about staying sharp, and that's what working out can translate to what time on the water. That by working out and eating the right foods and all the things that goes into trying to have somewhat of a healthy life and staying away from certain things, it can translate. Like for example, I've trained college kids who some of them may want to go and have a few beers on a Friday night, even though they're sailing on Saturday. Well, I don't need to be a rocket science to let them know that that may not be the best move in the world. I've had kids show up at California clinics. It just happened to be California. And as they show up for my workout, they're finishing a breakfast burrito. And I'm like, okay, it's good to eat something before you work out, but maybe not a breakfast burrito as we're,
Yeah.
coming to the workout.
Yeah, it's interesting because I suppose if I thought about doing sessions with you, you think it starts when you walk into your sailing fitness center, but
No,
sound of it, it's not.
you start the workout before you even get there. Just like when you're sailing, you shouldn't be coming to the race where you're not in the zone. Some people they just get right into it and it's like acting. They're in one zone, all of a sudden they just click right into it, and that's fine. Everybody's different. It's great to have a workout, but you got to be focused and practicing that focus and practicing good form and making sure you don't get hurt. In my opinion, to be truly strong is to calm yourself in the midst of, like we said, in the midst of chaos, and that can be in sailing. Things are going crazy. You've just got a delayed start. You've been penalized for something. There's somebody on the boat that's screaming at somebody. And it's like, okay, look, I need to stay calm and get organized. And let's see if we can have a good finish here, or at least get on to some kind of strategy. Well, by working out, I think that truly I've seen over the years, it bleeds over where it helps us to stay calm and reading good books and being around good, positive people. I can't stress that enough. If I had a team or if I'm particularly concerned about racing and all the attitude stuff, I would take 10, 15 minutes to read about positive self help or how do you help others in life, or, just brainwash yourself. Read some good book on leadership, find some good person that you can really admire.
Two people come into your sailing fitness center. One of
Mm,
them is, say, a top racer, elite racer. The other one is a weekend racer.
mm.
What's different about those programs?
It's like, well, when we're in the studio, they can still do exercises that are the same exercise, but maybe with that top professional racer, maybe they'll get pushed a little bit harder. Maybe their tempo is a little bit faster. Maybe how I speak to them and what I expect from them is going to be a little bit more fine tuned. There's a lot that can go into it. There's times where I may just want to play a respectful head game with the professional racer because I like doing that as well, where I'll say, they'll say how many reps, and I'll say, give me 5 million. I'll say some enormous amount, like, well, give me 30. And then they look at me again. I go, you heard me, just give me 30. I don't yell at anybody. I'm like, come on, you can do it. And I know they can't even do five, but I'm already telling them, no, give me 30. Why? Because I want them to kind of reach for that. Well, how's the thing go where you reach for the stars? Hopefully you get to the top of the trees, versus if you only reach for the top of the trees, you may not even get off the ground. Right.
Mm.
It's that shooting for something beyond, because that can push you to wherever you thought you could go. That bleeds into sailing and the whole thing. So that's how that mental thing of how do we take something like just sweating in some gym or sweating outside, but
Yeah.
it's what we're talking about and how do we translate it and relate it to whatever sailing they're doing. How can I have the edge over this other talented person? Well, you know that they're working out, right? Well, okay, you do what they're doing and maybe do a little bit more. What are you doing on the off time? What is the person who's winning doing? I find that the kids and the adults that are really getting incredible benefit, and all the racers and successful racers I've ever trained, it seems like there's a pattern where what are they doing when they're not on the water? Well, they're going to debriefing, they're reading, seeing things online. And when they go on the water, they're doing clinics. Maybe after school or after work, they're still getting on their boat and going out for an hour and hitting it, where maybe some of us may want to just go somewhere and have a cocktail. That's some of the big differences I see with people.
The environment on a racing sailboat is obviously very different from that in the
Uh,
gym. But how do you replicate
right.
the movements that you need to perform, whether you're a bow person or whatever it is, a grinder? How do you take that into the gym and develop it?
You're right. You're right. There's only so much you can do in the gym, but I found over the years there's definitely things that are like, this is similar to what I do on a boat, and this is a way that I can focus on form and technique. Years ago, I simply got some ropes and I started using it on different cable machines at the gym, and then also using. I remember buying a hiking bench, and then with the hiking bench, I realized I needed different straps because of the different kind of hiking people were doing. And then from there, I started getting into doing different exercises and using these different ropes and different size ropes where you're doing exercise, but you're on top of a Bosu ball. So we're trying to work on your balance and we're trying to still do these pulling motions, but yet underneath you don't have a stable platform. Well, that kind of replicates being on a
Yeah,
boat. And then I started having things like I remember buying I bought one of the old from American Magic, their old grinding pedestal. So, for all the people that are still worried about grinding, if they did want to do a workout or try to get certified to be a grinder on one of these Grand Prix teams, which I've had a number over the years, we could actually get on the pedestal. They all want to do a grinding pedestal test. So, that helps to have one of those in the studio. And also people who could give a hoot, they could care less about grinding. They're there for, let's say, Wednesday night racing. They're new to racing and they're new to sailing. They still enjoy getting on the grinding pedestal. It's a great workout, but they also feel like, hey, I'm doing what these monster grinders are doing, and they also feel like it's very sailing fitness and sailing oriented. So
so you have somewhat of a setup there that replicates specifically some of the actions you might have on a boat.
well, yeah, and they're all like wonderful toys to use. Like we're at a big playground. It's like, hey, let's get on the sled and let's slide and let's get on the bike and let's get on the but that all bleeds over, that all helps you when you're out there on the boat. You've done these kind of motions. And maybe if it even helps, and this gets to the mental game that when you're out there on a boat and let's say you're grinding for some crazy chance, you would remember, I remember what Harry and I were talking about. Hold your stomach tight, make sure you breathe, don't hold your breath, that kind of stuff.
Really interesting. Yeah.
I don't believe that there's one exercise or type of exercise that is the exercise. A variety is the key. And I don't, whether it's yoga or Pilates or weightlifting or, my specialty is weightlifting and, a few other different things. But when somebody starts talking absolutes about anything, I always get a little nervous because I'm like, gosh, everybody is so different. And whether you're a team or whether you're an individual, and there's just different needs. I mean, different colleges are different. When I trained MIT, they were a lot different than training, like Harvard. I mean, and they were a lot different than training Naval Academy. I mean, different necessities and different energies.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
same thing with people.
For the club racers specifically who might be listening, what do top racers do in training that those weekend sailors can realistically copy?
Yeah, I think most of the exercises are not going to be something that are be so far out. One of the things that I see as a common thing, and just to make it relatable, I'll see the top, and I mean the top racers in the world. I've trained them from all over the world, but they'll get on a bike. In between their sailing or when they do stuff, they'll either bring a bike with them or they'll rent a bike. But they're, they'll go for a long walk. They stay active, and any of us can do that same kind of thing. The way they eat. A lot of the top racers are not necessarily, let's say, the most extreme case of like weighing out things and have to do this many grams of this and this much protein powder. But we can all do exactly the same thing and see how it works for us, especially when it comes to our energy, not necessarily, losing weight and a lot of things that are so important, but just, I see what they're eating this way. They're eating this way so that they can have energy and so that they have, the best amino acids in them and vitamins. Any of us can do that, and I think when we experiment with that kind of stuff, we're going, oh, wow, I feel plugged in. I feel like I'm plugged into a different thing. At the very least, I'm doing some of the things that my heroes do. I know a lot of the younger kids, they have no problem doing that, emulating somebody and saying, hey, I'm going to get online. What is their lifestyle? As long as it's not too extreme. I mean, some of these racers, they've got lifestyles that are just, it's just not relatable. I mean, a lot of us have what's known as kids. A lot of us have, I don't know, jobs. Some of these professional racers are and I mean this with respect, they're enabled to do what they do. They've got sponsors and they're getting paid to race all over the world in whatever capacity. So, their job is to go ahead and work out and get on the bike. But we can do the same thing. We can do different things. But they're very relatable. It's not about spending money. It's about just duplicating some of these things that they do.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So I'm taking away so far that a lot of this is about understanding the motivation and grit that you have to do it. And then also I'm hearing just get moving. You don't particularly have to go to a specialist gym. I know you may not have any openings anyway, but a lot of whether it's biking or walking, just
Right.
get
Absolutely. Everything is just so relatable. I mean, it's like, and you don't even need to go ahead and go join any kind of a gym. You could do this in the convenience of, it sounds like I should be on an infomercial on TV, but I mean, you really could do this out of your home, man. I mean, it's one of those things that it's such a good buzz and it helps in so many different ways as us just simply being a human. It helps us with stress level. It helps us sleep better at night. It helps us in our relationships, and it's just getting out there and doing something because you start doing that chemical reaction with the adrenaline and the dopamine, which is so essential for people, especially with some people that I've trained, with like, for example, Parkinson's people, they need to have dopamine regulation.
what other tips and advice do you have then for racing sailors of all ilks?
I think if they're already involved in all the racing, they're already doing something that's a real nice first world kind of a luxury, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, everything we're talking about is just, it's God, this is a great thing. We're talking about sailing and racing, et cetera, et cetera. But it seems like the greatest thing that people could do, other than actually getting on the boat and sailing, is like, okay, maybe they could go for a walk, maybe try to do some push-ups. When's the last time so many people think that they're getting punished when they do push-ups? No, it's just a discipline. Get down there, do it on your knees or do it off your knees. It doesn't matter, but these things will all of a sudden relate when you get on a boat or when you have to get up on the dock and if you're not working your legs and say that you pull up to the dock and you don't have flexibility that you've been kind of challenging a little bit, that's when I see some people pulling muscles and slipping. And it's like, some of the most simple things like get off the boat, so, you know,
Hmm. Yeah, I totally understand that.
yeah.
Harry, one question that I'm intrigued about, what's the hardest thing you teach?
I think maybe the hardest thing is getting to people where you push them to the edge and giving them a view of their future potential self.
Hmm.
And it's not easy at all. It's dreadful. I mean, it's you never want to
Is
hurt
it
anybody.
why is it dreadful?
Well, because I'm causing you pain. I'm beating the hell out of you. I'm not there to have an easy time with you, but there's times where I want to take you to a healthy failure where you're not going to get hurt, but I'm going to take you to your own personal edge and say, okay, look, you went this far. Let's see where we go next time, or next time maybe we'll take it a little bit easier. Because when you're out there sailing, if you, it was like Vince Lombardi who used to, I think this was his motto, said, "Hey, we trained so hard that when it came to game day, it was like a piece of cake." And all I'm saying is that maybe we don't have exactly that mentality, but if you train with a lot of focus with the workouts and you train with doing this to work on my agility and my balance and be a better team player, I think when it comes down to the regatta itself, you're plugged in, man. It's like the juice is flowing versus if you just show up for the race and you really haven't been thinking about it. It's like, okay, you may have a nice time, but I think working out is one of those ways at a minimum can help to make you a better sailor and to keep you plugged in. And I've met plenty of sailors that are incredible sailors that absolutely do nothing and they eat whatever the heck they want to eat and maybe they're overweight, underweight, but it just seems like it works a lot better when you're in some kind of a fitness program.
As I look outside where it's about 29 degrees Fahrenheit outside, I'm thinking about maybe I should go for a bike ride or yeah.
Yeah.
Fortunately, I've got
No.
a Peloton down in the basement that
It-
I'll be using later.
yeah, and that helps having something indoors, doesn't it? But then also that we could talk about it all day long and we can read the books and we can say this and do this, but how do you put it into practice? And I'm just finding that unless you want to do illegal drugs or something, one way to really get our consciousness higher is training, whatever that means. It's not the Harry method or, your method, or, maybe it's running, maybe it's, weightlifting, maybe it's playing hockey, but, everybody should have a little something. And when you do it, if you have that kind of focus, it can go right into your sailing ability, whether you're a racer or whether you're a weekend or whether you're, doing like the clients I've trained, doing the Olympic bids and America's Cup, and especially these college sailors, man, they are just working their tushy off now. You know, any high school sailors out there that are racing or thinking about going to college, I mean, you really need to think beyond what you're doing in high school. What are you doing in between? How many clinics are you going to? Are you working with a personal coach? Are you, that's what these colleges are looking for. So.
Any last thoughts, Harry, for good club racers who may have a regional or national championship coming up in a few months? What are a couple of things you tell them?
Yeah, first off, they need to take evaluation of where they are right now today. Set some goals, just like anybody else who's trying to prepare from right now to getting to that point that we talked to earlier, 6 months down the road or a year. And you break it out in the chewable bite sizes. What can I do this week? What can I do in a month? What can I do in 3 months? Show up, and where you actually have to put on exercise clothes and do something, not go out and buy a membership or do this or buy equipment, but go for the walk, or, things we talked about. If you have a bike inside your place in the basement, do something. I would hate to think somebody who would just show up for their first weekend race and they haven't at least stretched out before they get there or try to get into the zone. You also don't want accidents to happen. So by working out, that's another way to help prevent accidents. You know what your body's limitations are. And, when you get on the sailboat, you're a bit more confident depending upon what kind of boat you're on. Some boats, as we know, you just have to be kind of like rail meat. Well, for some people, just tacking is a bit of a thing. Squat down, make sure the boom doesn't smack you in the face, get
Yeah,
over to the other side. For some people, they're bow person and they have to be like a monkey. Hey, climb up there and do this. Go over here, run here. I mean, they're working their tushy off. Then you got the person on the halyards, and they're like, well, you know what? They better not have a pinched neck or shoulder
yeah,
because they're going to be doing a lot of pulling, man. And then guess what? Through all of this chaos, and having maybe an owner that has no patience, and he or she is screaming at you or screaming, do this, we're coming up on the line. And so I believe this, that by exercising and working out, it helps us maybe that calmness that we're talking about, that we don't lose our marbles. Cause there's been a few owners that I've wanted to throw off the boat, literally, just like, yeah, and not even screaming at me, just listen to them bark. I'm like, you know what? I know how to sail this boat. I don't need them. It's like, crazy.
Harry, thank you. This has been a really inspiring and interesting time with you. Tell us a couple of things. Firstly, how do people find you? And then secondly, you have a foundation that's very near and dear to your heart right now.
Okay, so if anybody wants to get in touch with me, they got a question or anything, you can find me on the web. I'm on Instagram. It's either under Harry Legum or my business name, Annapolis Sailing Fitness. So you can send me a text or an email or something if you have any questions. Yeah. And the foundation that I'm particularly passionate about is the U Foundation, named after my good friend Jeff Ewanson and just everything they're doing. So I definitely want to give a shout out to everybody to go ahead and look up the U Foundation and maybe give whatever you can give. Mary Ewanson,
Yeah,
what she's doing with it is fantastic, and all the organizations that they
totally agree.
contribute to. So yeah, good stuff.
I've been lucky to have Mary on the pod a couple of times.
Yeah,
She's
love her. Love Mary.
yeah.
Yeah, I used to train her, and we go way back and train her and Jeff, and yeah, we go way back. I love Mary.
And also, you told me that you actually trained Jimmy Spithill. So, Jimmy, if you're listening, or if anybody who knows Jimmy is listening, would love
Oh.
to have you on the pod, mate. Get in touch. So, Harry, thanks so much for taking the time.
Yeah, good deal. A lot of fun. I love this kind of stuff. Good stuff.